Pixies.
One more.
They're well, not their last album because they started randomly releasing albums in like 2013, right? Again, so but
Yeah.
this is their last in terms of I guess the vintage run, if you want to call it.
Pixies classic.
Pixies version 1.0. We'll go with
Yeah.
Trompe Le Monde, the album that led to the breakup
Mm.
afterwards. What'd you think of this one, Matt?
Yeah, I'll just run the numbers real quick. So this is Trompe Le Monde's number 153 in the 1990s on Best Ever Albums, number 16 in 1991. We're going back in the time machine on this one. 840 of all time. It's the Pixies' fourth highest rated album behind the other ones we covered, including Bossanova, Surfer Rosa, and Doolittle. And Pixies are ranked number 18 of overall artist rankings on Best Ever Albums. And this to me is like it's kind of like the quintessential for me Pixies experience, because the first time I knew two songs on this, one of which was the cover of Head On by the Jesus and Mary Chain.
Right.
And the other one was UMass, a song that I knew from various places quite well. And then the rest of this, the other 13 tracks on this, I did not know. So this was pretty much a fresh listen. And because the Pixies are the Pixies, and they're one of these bands that just there's a lot of chaos, I think, in some of their sounds, and a lot of things happening, and some of the songs are super short, but there's a lot of sounds coming from it, and some of it sounds off key, but it a little like avant-garde, but there's also like after you put, then you can quickly get to some melody that's in there, and then the vocalizations that Frank Black is doing is certainly it's not traditional, right? So it's a lot thrown at you, I guess, on an initial listen, and it's hard for me to kind of like hang my hat on something and kind of figure out what's happening. And so this is a record this is the one that I had to listen to the most this time around, because it's just like, okay, I got to dig deeper in here and kind of really get at what I'm hearing. Which is kind of like my just overall experience with the Pixies in general. Or bands that are kind of like them. I think one of the differences here is that with the other records that we've covered, particularly the first two, Doolittle and Surfer Rosa, I was either somewhat familiar with the albums, or like many of the songs on those albums, because I think that's where a lot of their, most prominent singles came from, or songs from movie soundtracks or what have you, or that are just played that you hear more. This was not that as much, right? Aside from those two songs, this was like a fresh listen. So, and it's one of those records that the more I listened to it, the more I liked, right? The more I got into it, the more I understood what they were doing, the more the different melodic parts I was hearing underneath kind of the chaos and the art and the experimentation happening. And so I ended up really liking it. I probably listened to this about 5 times this week. And I dig their vibe, man. I think that they just got a really, great formula for creating sounds that are initially very kind of in some ways off-putting or confusing, and then but also like really having a there's a lot more than meets the eye. It's more than just not judging a book by its cover. There's a lot underneath here. And that was kind of my main takeaway, is like, damn, they did it again. Because initially I was like, I don't know if I'm going to like this as much, right? But the more I listened to it, I was like, nope, I certainly do. They just, they had some great, bass lines in here. They had some great little guitar parts in the background that were just adding this little extra oomph to the song. And there's a lot of beauty in this as well. They got great song titles too, which is it's like what Bird Dream of the Olympus Mons, Subaculture. It's just like, the Navajo knows an interesting way to end this record. They're just kind of this quirky band that you could totally see the influence. You could totally see, the indie rock, the specialty of this band, and how they were just, they basically helped create a genre of the alt rock indie band, So it's thumbs up for me. It's one of those things like, man, I should have been listening to the Pixies a lot more back in the day, but I'm listening to them now. So thumbs up for me. I enjoyed it.
Well, I was listening to the Pixies a lot back
Yeah.
in the day, Matt, and it's another great album.
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend who's younger, who's getting into the Pixies now, and actually recently saw them. And the first thing that always stands out when you see the Pixies now, you see 3 of the 4 original members, and the first thing that stood out to him is, wow, the bass lines are great. I laughed.
Yep.
I'm like, well, that's the one thing that's not there anymore. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Kim Deal.
Yep.
And this, certainly you get Kim Deal like on track 1, right? And then she
Yep.
disappears as a vocal presence, right? So I know this one's often called like the Frank Black Pixies album, right? Because his influence, I think, is more not that there's not great bass lines here, but you could definitely, there was always that power struggle within the band, right? Of
Yep.
Frank Black wanting to take over, much like Ryan Adams, who we talked about earlier. I don't think Frank Black is always an easy guy to get along with, basically, at all. And then, you had like Joey Santiago just, kind of there, like, playing along with varying levels of success. And then, Kim Deal here, but then feeling unfulfilled and like, starting the Amps and the Breeders and all these side projects along the way, right? And so, but yeah, still though, there's a magic when they're all together. And one thing I realized about the Pixies is like, I don't know if I have a favorite Pixies album. Like, people have asked me that. I like them all for different reasons, and I don't think I like any of them for reasons that are more significant than others, right? Like this album, I feel like, starts off really strong. Like Trompe Le Monde, Planet of Sound, and Alec Eiffel are all really interesting songs, and they're different. They have the Pixies.
Yep.
There's like a stamp of the Pixies, like you said, the chaos and the discordant. It's not quite noise rock, but it's as close as mainstream alt rock can get to noise rock, I'd say. Which is why it's funny that they cover Head On, but they do it as the Pixies, right? It's not the full wall of sound, right? Like of swirling guitars and stuff that you think of when you think of Jesus and Mary Chain, right? There still is a looseness to it, where you and I have both talked about, Matt, that one of the things we love about that shoegaze noise rock is there aren't loose ends to it, right? It's like a wall of sound, like enveloping you, like almost like a drug, right? There's not loose parts where it's like, oh, that's a note that's played off tune, or they're trying to play a lot of notes in a row or runs. It's like you're gonna stay with that note for a while, right? Or a couple that you bleed into, and you're certainly not gonna have bass lines just shoved to the front of the mix like the Pixies often do. And then in the middle you get UMass, like you said, a song that I think is probably the most well-known song off this album. There's not
oddly enough, it wasn't a single.
Yeah, there's not a lot of I don't think there's really any of, if you were to pick the 10 singles that someone might know of the Pixies, I don't know if any of them are on this album. But as you go through this album, about half of this rewards further listening, because at first it's just like, oh, it's a Pixies song, and then of course you could dig into, like you said, the beauty and what makes it different on each one. And then there's the ones that immediately connect because there's a pop sensibility to them, and a lot of them present on the first half of this album, I would say. And then you start to see the convention mixed with the chaos on the back end. You just have to dig harder, and that's where it's like the difference between the Pixies as Where Is My Mind, or Here Comes Your Man, and stuff, that they don't sound like traditional radio alt rock, but there's also, you can't help but notice there's enough convention within what the Pixies do that it's accessible enough if you can't go into like true noise rock, right? Or art rock, or like what the Melvins are, right? Like just a assaultive, right, rock coming right at you, or feedback driven rock. Like I always I think a good comparative point to the Pixies is Sonic Youth, because I think they have similar artistic ethoses, but Sonic Youth is not afraid to like be unattainable, right? Whereas the Pixies just kind of always have an attainability to them to some degree. For you.
I like that. I like attainability.
Yeah, well, and I do too. It's like kind of what they're... well, I also like unattainability at times too, more so than I think maybe you and Josh do at times. Hence why I love Sonic Youth. But I think another band that we covered that I think that's less popular, but that like has the ability to do it as well, as somebody like Yo La Tengo, right? They have an ability to take music that could be hard and make it easier to access, and I think that's the Pixies' great gift. You certainly by this point it is 91, right? So this is right when Nevermind is coming out, and whenever you listen to the Pixies, you can't help but go like, oh my gosh, like Nirvana's the evolution of this. They just managed to spit and polish it even more than the Pixies. They just had that last little bit, right, that like truly made them accessible, and broke them, right? And
Yeah.
you can't script that. It just happens. But I'm not kind of rambling a little bit. I really like this album, and I love the fact that I don't have a favorite Pixies album, and I don't have a least favorite Pixies album, and I don't have the ability to rank the Pixies albums from 1 to 5 because I don't even know what the answer is day to day. Some of it comes down to if I listened to all 5 Pixies albums every day for 10 days, like I'd have a different one each day, right? Depending on how it hit me that day. And there's not a lot of bands I can say that about. And
I can see that.
Their quality control rate is high for me.
Yeah, I might just go with like either Doolittle or Surfer Rosa just because that had more of the hits on it. So like I might go more towards that, but it's certainly not a knock on the other on Bossanova or this. It's their, but like I see what you're saying because the formula is pretty much there. And we've been talking about this tonight. Bands that kind of.
Well, we're saying the formula, by the way, if you don't know, like the loud, soft, the distortion, but also within a tight framework of how they play. It's the guitar pushed to the front at times, and then the bass pushed to the front at other times, right? Like you said, Frank Black singing, right?
And just like off kilter, like kind of times it like it's not a formulaic structure, right? Like it's kind of like there's a lot of like
drum.
Yeah, there's a lot of chaos in the structure of the song, right? And so when you first hear it, you're like, there's a lot of confusion, at least for my, like, what's going on here, right? Like it's not just hitting you right away. You have to sit with it for a little bit more. But like, because it's so different and off kilter from like a lot of traditional pop music, I think that staying in that lane, you can pull that off doing more records like that without having to quote unquote vary your sound, right? And still you're still interesting doing stuff like this because it's really good. It's like when you're combining the chaos with the melody and the beauty. That's a wonderful formula and they do it as well as anybody, I think. So yeah, and funny, John, you bring up Nevermind. So Trompe Le Monde was released on September 23rd, 1991. Do you know when Nevermind was released?
Probably like a week later.
September 24th, a day later, which I find weird because I always thought that they were released on the Tuesday for a while. So I'm not sure exactly, but basically they had the same release date. So
you can't listen to Pixie. I mean, Kurt Cobain himself said to some degree that like the core formula, he was more self depreciating, right? Like, we basically just ripped off the Pixies, right? But I did to end, not about the Pixies necessarily, but I blew a friend of mine's mind this week, Matt, because I sort of offhandedly said something I thought people knew, that Smells Like Teen Spirit sounds a lot like More Than a Feeling by Boston. and it does. Okay. Like if you listen to it, it does. And my friend's like, what are you talking about, and stuff like that. And then it was one of those things where like a day later I got like a text like, holy shit, like it's and then like my friend I guess must have gone a deep dive because he's like, there's even a clip of like Kurt Cobain like acknowledging it and fucking around and like playing the beginning of. I said, yeah, man, it's
I never thought of that, but
it's like how Come As You Are is 80s by Killing Joke, right? It's basically the same song.
Right. Oh, I forgot about that. Wow. You're right.
So that's not to take away from Nirvana, but they wore their influences on their sleeve. But
and it just reinforces the fact that everybody does that. Like most people are doing something like that, or at least
I never had to be told though about More Than a Feeling. Like I heard it like kind of growing up listening to that. Like as soon as I heard, More Than a Feeling for the first time, which was I think as crazy as this sounds, like slightly after probably I had heard Smells Like Teen Spirit. I'm like, oh, they're the same guitar riff. And I just was always surprised that like people, because it's the riff going to the chorus, it's like the same exactly.
Yeah, no, and it's probably I could pick out some of that stuff sometimes too, but I don't know, something about
usually,
Nevermind or It Smells Like Teen Spirit is just it's so ingrained as that's what that is, that there's not, my brain can't even get to the jump to like this sounds like something else because it's just so much Nirvana. But there was something we covered, I think maybe something in the Beastie Boys out that was a very similar, like I'm like, oh, that is totally, and I didn't write it down, but I pick up on stuff like that a lot of times. And artists like Noel Gallagher
well, it's
said
like
that,
how you knew Steely Dan was the Lord Tariq and Peter Guns.
well, that's really, because that's exactly what that is. But I'm talking about just like just notes, like the progression of the chords and stuff like that. And you go, oh, that's the same melody as this other song, right? Like, and so, and like, yeah, and even Noel Gallagher was like, oh, I don't look back in anger. I'm just ripping off Imagine, And so it's, I think it happens a lot, but it's there's only so much you can do in the confines of.
That's as obvious as it gets.
Yes. Yeah. So I think a lot of people do it. But
there's only
key,
so many chord progressions,
right?
So
but the key is actually, I'm reading a book now that's like actually technically, if you really look at it, there's way more than you would think, which makes sense to a certain extent because there's so many different sounds.
That's why Sonic Youth exists, to show us all of them.
Right, they do. Yes, right, and yes, because a lot of these chords are ones that you probably wouldn't want to hear.
Correct. That's why I said that's why they exist, to show all of them. Like,
yep, that's fair. Yeah.
All right. Well, what